Welcome back to Rehab. This is part 4, I think. We're going to continue adding to it. But today we're going to talk about what it looks like to get back into action, meaning closing the loop, getting back into your sport, getting back to full speed. Now there's 4 main topics we're going to talk about today. 1 is the pain of waking muscles up, dealing with the stiffness. 2 is separating skill movements from the athletic, the bigger global capacity. 3 is going to be closing the loop, dealing with the emotions of going back to something that hurt you in the past. And 4 is being patient with the process of returning to your sport or activity. So if you'll notice, after a few weeks, the shoulder swelling is down. I've got movement back. I got back to jiu-jitsu this week. So it's part of the process of healing. And again, I'll reference the shoulder. This is a separated AC joint as my current experience, but this applies if you had an ankle sprain, a hip impingement, some type of ankle, knee, any type of joint injury. Most joint injuries go along this process. So just keep that in mind and apply it to your circumstances situation. First is that you must realize that your body is still protecting it. And even if the joint itself has healed, the tissue is healed, because it's been, remember, 14, or this is probably day 21 or 14 or 21 or 28. At some point, the tissue has codified and solidified and healed. And even if that is the case, you still have to deal with all the area, all the muscles around it. And there's a process of waking those muscles up. You have to look for the pain as a reminder of muscle stiffness. Remember, pain isn't always a signal that something is wrong or the injury is happening. It just is a signal that, hey, I should pay attention to this. So, for example, in the shoulder, I have to pay attention to opening up with small, fine-tuned movements to try and remind the rear delts, the pecs, the lats, the triceps, biceps, how to work. But as tissue is layering, creating the scab around the joint, you are also trying to remodel it so that you don't get stuck. Because if I just keep throwing and layering down with the fibroblasts, layering more and more tissue, then eventually you get this bound down, you get this calcified tissue, and you lose range of motion. You'll notice this in people that have an ankle sprain. They either never recover well, or they don't do the rehab, or let's say a knee injury, or a hip injury, or back, or an elbow, or wrist, or a shoulder. It doesn't really matter. When they have an injury, if they don't continue to move, they get stiff, and they might have stability in the joint, but they lose range of motion. And you see guys that they can't move their body because their joint's stuck. So while you're layering down tissue and creating this scab to create stability around it, you also have to remind all that tissue that, hey, my shoulder needs to be able to move and do all these different ranges of motion. So it's a process, it's a negotiation. I'm being patient with the load to let the fibroblasts layer down better tissue, and I'm also putting load on them to train and condition the tissue along the proper way. So remember, as you open up and train these different movements, you will have stiffness because you do have a negotiation where the muscles are pulling on bones, they're pulling on these connective tissue insertion attachment points to allow the motion to happen. And that will be painful. And some of that pain is going to be hesitance, where I'm like, oh, okay. Your trick is to remember to go slow. When you get to a specific spot and you feel a little bit of painful feedback, slow down, find a range of motion, and just do small oscillations. The trick is to remember that there is an attention to detail that is required in this portion. You might be used to using big compensations and moving your body around, but when you have an injury, it's time to slow down and find that attention to detail. Every single week that goes by, you're gonna have more confidence, more tissue, more muscle back online, but that doesn't mean you're ready to skip to these big global movements to be jerky. You want to have capacity. So expect pain, but don't let that stop you. Allow that stiffness to inform you along the direction you want to move and slow down when in doubt. Next, we want to get back to our athletic movements. Now, what I mean by that is we're going to separate things like rolling and skipping and hopping and throwing and crawling and jumping and falling from the context of a greater thing like a sport. So for example, if you have a shoulder injury, we're gonna think about throwing. So I'm working on getting back into a throw. So let me think of the rotation. I'm gonna think I have to break apart the actual pieces, and I'm thinking of the skill movement separate from something like baseball or frisbee or football. You have to think of the athletic skill movements as pieces that you also have to train, just like a push and a pull. There's these dynamic movements that require speed. The difference is that before you add on the intensity and speed, you have to go through the motion and you gradually build up more and more speed. For example, with the shoulder, I've been throwing a very light ball against the wall and just getting reps and rotating. You'll notice that this is challenging is if this is your non-dominant side, your non-dominant, let's say digit, and what you find is that, oh, I'm actually pretty awkward. I don't really know how to rotate and throw. This is the importance of training. So as a reminder, once you start to recover from this, make this generalized athletic capacity part of your everyday week. So start thinking about these movements. What movements feel off limits? Can I rotate? Can I throw? In general, running, jumping, throwing, rolling, falling, crawling, those are going to be the basic things you want to work on, but train those just like you would train a bench press or a squat. Treat them as reps and sets. I'm going to do quality, I'm going to add load, add speed, and add volume and intensity. You have to get that back because that continues to, once you have the stiffness start to work out of the tissue and the muscles are engaged, you now have to train those into these global patterns. So there's localized patterns we work on with waking the muscle up, and globalized patterns with these larger full body movements. That is important, so get your reps there. Third, you have to remember that there will be emotion with this. So part of the process is to close the loop. We have to go back to the thing that created the irritation, the problem in the first place. For example, if you were sprinting and you pulled a hamstring, you need to get back to sprinting. That means you might need to go back out to the place you got hurt, or if that's not available to you, just think about the capacity of what your body was functioning in. So build up strides, working back into this. You can't let this injury define you. Just because you got hurt once, that doesn't mean it's going to happen again, A, and a B, it's an opportunity to learn. You're going to go back wiser, your body will be stronger and more resilient. But you have to get back into this and understand that there will be emotion. So if you can think about the muscles as one unit and the skills as another unit, you can remind yourself of the constituent elements to create a trusting setting, saying, okay, all right, last time I fell, I hurt my shoulder, so I'm gonna slowly work on it. Can I just roll on the ground? Can I put pressure on it? Can I get the muscles? Can I do push-ups? Okay, that's good. Now let me think about rolling and crawling and can I break these things down? This is all part of the process of approaching the fear. Every time you feel that anxiety and tension bring up in your chest and you wanna close down, calm down, use your breath, slow down, and remember that you were okay. And that's how you take the rehabilitation setting, the therapy setting, and you start with exposure therapy at a very low level and you build back up. There will always be this discomfort of emotion and uncertainty and anxiety as you approach this more unbridled, open-ended movement. That is part of the process. But remember, life, you have two options. You either never approach this and you keep it and you hide, you run away from it, we don't go in that closet. That's one way of starting. You cut your body off from certain movements. That's how you start to die. The other alternative is you have to face what scares you. You can do it on your terms and you ease into that. And on the other side of that is a stronger, wiser, more resilient you. That's the beauty of injury, is that it is a process and an invitation to slow down, reclaim something that was maybe you never really had a good feel for before, and come back better. Remember, there will be fear, there will be emotion. So breathe and remember that you've done the work to build up to that. And slowly but surely, you'll get back to a healthy, stronger, more resilient you. Last, you have to remember that as you get back into this, it is a process. Remember that as you start to feel better, there will be a time where you are starting to feel more confident. Potentially, sometimes the body's the other way, where your body's ready, but you're not confident. Oftentimes, you start to feel more confident than you are, and your body isn't fully ready. So treat your return to sport or return to activity with a graded approach. Can you get back in? So for example, this week, a little bit of a slower approach to jiu-jitsu for me, about 40% effort. I was just very mindful of the shoulder, working. I tapped early in a few different circumstances. I was just smart. When you get back to soccer or baseball or volleyball or running or swimming, just ease into it. The ego of I was here at this high level and now I'm here will be tough, but don't let that ego push you into competitive situations you can't control. Just remember, first week back, I'm keeping it 40%, and it's just little stacking little baby wins to go, okay, I was here, I got a little bit better, and now this week I can go back. So every week I'm adding 10% more effort. And the beauty of going back to sport and why it's required is that it will push you into some things, I wasn't ready for that, but I'm okay. It builds confidence. So remember, it's a negotiation between you creating a safe environment that you can control and then exposing yourself. The return to sport is an exposure to unpredictability, uncertainty, a little bit of chaos, but you do it in measured amounts. So, okay, I got rolled, all right, well, I guess I'm okay. Those are the things that push your confidence. And eventually, 2, 3, 4 weeks go by of returning back to your sport and you start to feel like, all right, I'm at 80%. Okay, I feel good at 90%. And then there will be a time on the other end of maybe it's 1 week, maybe it's 5 weeks, that you are back to better than ever. As long as you continue to do this, As we go through this rehabilitation process, I want to remind you that there will be a rinse, wash, repeat aspect. Just because you did something once on day 2 doesn't necessarily mean you don't have to go back to that. Remember the basics. You're constantly negotiating between layering down and strengthening tissue and remodeling and conditioning that tissue. You're constantly having to work on refining your movement so that your skill and your overall muscle engagement capacity is sound. You're constantly working on developing your overall ability to put that into globalized movements and return to an unpredictable environment like sport. It is that process. But that's where you start to see there's not rehabilitation and strength training. It's rehabilitation and strength training on a spectrum. Your warm-up will look a little bit more like your rehab, and slowly as you get more tissue capacity, that will look more like high performance, sprinting, jumping, explosive work. So notice it's a spectrum that isn't binary, I'm in this setting or this setting. It's always this way. And some days you might feel you'll go and do some work and I got to step back a little bit. That's okay. Just remember that when you do the therapy process correctly, you will irritate things. It's one step backwards, but it creates a inflammation and a healing process that gets you 2 or 3 steps forward. So it's constantly in that situation. Going and training to get stronger in your bench press, you irritate the muscles, you make some damage, you get stronger. That is the process of life. But slowly you move from incapacitated and injured to capable, confident, and fully at a high level of performance. That is the process. Keep up the good work, and remember, if you need help, there are resources, free programs at the links below or somewhere associated with this video. You can overcome this. You are more than this injury, and a better, stronger, more resilient you is on the other side of this if you keep your head down and do the right work. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks, subscribe, and all that fun stuff. See you later.